Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Avorion episode 51. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing with our station build, the Frontier Station something something. I still have neglected to check what I named it. It involves Frontier Station somewhere in the name. The last episode we did the layout. We extruded the layout a little bit to make it a little bit of a 3D structure. We put some struts, I guess you could call them, around between the central cylinder and the outer ring, to kind of make it look like someone actually put some effort into making sure that the thing is a little bit sturdy and a little bit rigid and not likely to collapse with the slightest nudge. You may have already noticed we've got a block counter down the bottom of the screen, and that's literally the block counter that's shown on the status window on the right hand side of the screen, just zoomed in and pulled to the bottom so that you can see it. And the purpose behind this is because we've got all three axes active for the mirror mode, just to save as much time as we possibly can. And I noticed when I was building that not only does it play the sound effect for placing all of the blocks when you place one, but as a result of this mirror mode, the block count goes up much faster than you might expect. I was a little bit surprised at the end of the last episode that we were actually over 30,000 blocks, and then we used the merge function, brought it down to just over 20,000, and now you can see we're back up to 23,400, almost 500. Granted, the video playback is 4 times the actual speed. And the block counter is synchronized to match that. So obviously it's incrementing 4 times faster than it does in the game, but I think you'll be able to appreciate that it goes up pretty quick. The number of blocks goes up pretty quick. Now I don't have the block counter on for more than the first couple of minutes of the video because it takes quite a bit of time to render everything out and get it set up so that I can show you, but I just wanted to give you an example for a little while just for the sake of casual interest. Now, what we're working on here specifically is the structural connection between the 2 walls in the outer ring of the station. I guess is the most succinct way I could put it. I thought about doing this outer ring as like a torus, which is basically, it's a circle and it's a cross section of a circle as well. So if you were to draw a line from the center point of the circle outward into a cross section, wherever it lands, it will always be a perfect circle. That's kind of like the whole idea behind the basic torus. The difficulty with that is that it's a lot of curves, a lot of compound curves and angles, and it would take an extremely long time, require a lot of blocks, and it wasn't the kind of thing that I had my heart set on from the beginning. It was, the thought occurred to me and I thought about what it would involve, and it was a very easy decision to not take on that kind of thing. Maybe some other day, maybe with something smaller. Maybe I'll just go absolutely crazy and do something bigger, just to spite myself. You never know. But the idea here with this little bit that I'm working on is we've got the walls that are straight up and down for a certain amount of space, a certain distance, and then we're going to have kind of a bit of a curve to the top and the bottom of the ring, and then it's going to flatten off on the top and the bottom. So it'll be maybe a little bit more suited to placing turrets than it would otherwise be, because we have that flat section. It might be a little bit easier, and for the sake of the block count and the time requirement, it'll be quite a bit easier. So it's not an especially difficult thing that we're doing now. This is the textbook how to make a dynamic curve sort of thing. We have these pieces going in, they're a certain height, and then we'll put in the blocks behind them that are necessary to fill it all in. Right, we're using the inside corners, and then we'll switch to the outside corners with these, and it'll smooth the whole thing out, and then we'll build on top of them the exact same shapes, but just a little bit shorter, and then the next row will be a little bit shorter still, and that's how we get that sort of a curve that's gradual. It's not like a circular arc. It's its own sort of shape. That's kind of one of the things that I wanted to work on and sort of get things taken care of. But then I realized that if I go too far with this, I'm going to have this whole thing closed off, and then I'm going to have to mess around with trying to get the equipment in the ring when it's closed off, which is something of this size, probably not as difficult as it could be in certain circumstances, but it's also going to be a hell of a lot easier to do it before it's closed off. So I started, I got a good feel for how this was going. Everything was coming together, and I said, yeah, that's how we're going to do it. We're going to pause on this process of building up this little wall, fill in everything with the equipment that we need, and then we can close it off and not have to worry about it. So you can see we've got the second row going in now, but it's not going to get a whole lot farther than that. One of the things that I did do as part of the details, and it might be a little bit difficult to see now, but by the time it's done and everything is closed off, it'll be a little bit more visible, as I put a little crease in between sections of the top of this outer ring. And of course, because we've got the mirror mode, it's going to be doing the same thing on the underside of the ring. But rather than having just one uniform shape all the way around, I thought it might be interesting to have just a little bit of a crease in between uniform sections. Just, again, visual interest, the little wee tiny details that we can throw in. They don't take a lot, but this here being the prime example of what we're talking about, this little gap they're working right now, that's the crease that I'm talking about. So there's going to be a little valley in between, you know, breaking up the top and the bottom of the outer ring into segments instead of just being one whole piece all the way around. So I mean, it's a fairly straightforward thing, but again, got thinking in terms of how we're going to manage all of the equipment that we need to add. There's a lot of space here that we could use for adding equipment. Now, being that it's a station, I discovered fairly quickly that the power consumption just for being a station is pretty high. We haven't even added any equipment yet, and the power consumption was already above what we needed for the Serpovectum with all of its equipment on board. And it makes sense. Like, I don't think it's inappropriate. I don't think it's a bad mechanic. It was just something that I hadn't really thought about, and when I noticed it, I was like, oh, that's a lot. So we're going to need generators. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily worthwhile to add energy storage, but I kind of expect that I will anyways, just because. Whether or not it helps with shields, to be completely honest, I don't know. If we end up using energy weapons like lasers, I know that the energy storage can help with that. But whether or not we find ourselves in a situation where it's worth having, who knows? It's situationally dependent. And I can't predict all of the situations that it might be in, except to say it's possible that it might be in a situation at some point where having some extra stored energy might be a benefit. So we'll probably have a little bit of energy storage somewhere. Computer capacity, processing power for adding extra ship, or in this case station systems, may be a benefit. So we'll definitely add some of that. We have the option to add production capacity. One of the things that's going to be attached to this station is going to be some hangars for the purpose of launching fighters, for the purpose of defending the station. Fairly straightforward motivation for having hangars, but being able to produce things a little bit faster, whether it's fighters or commodities or, you know, whatever, definitely seems like something that we would want to have on board. Integrity field generators, shields, definitely. I've already, you won't see it in this episode, but the next episode you'll see we'll actually have the entire station covered with integrity fields, except for the little narrow struts between the ring and the central cylinder. I'm not too concerned about the struts. But basically, everything that's important on the ship will be protected by integrity fields, as well as shields. And then we can start thinking in terms of all of the other things that we might like to add. One thing that I have to look into, and again, you know, betraying my ignorance, this is the first station that I've built and I haven't sat down and gone over the wiki in tremendous detail, is when we made the station, we were asked to select what kind of station it would be, and I chose research. And I think I mentioned in the last episode just because it seems like it would be a nice thing to have. But what I'm thinking is that maybe in the future, when we build a different station, we'll be able to select what kind of thing it will produce, and then apply the blueprint from this station, and then instead of having a station that does research, it'll be a station that does whatever we chose when we place the route, I guess you could say, of the station. So we can reuse, theoretically in my mind, this model for a station and just have different purposes by creating different stations and choosing what we want them to be. So there's that sort of thing that crossed my mind. And in that case, I would kind of like to have a fairly all-purpose layout and design for the station itself, and being capable of doing all of the things that we might want it to do, but also, of course, having a little bit of freedom to make some modifications to fine-tune and sort of customize for a specific task. All of these different things going through my mind as we're trying to add things. I decided one of the things that I wanted to do was fill out these structural elements connecting the cylinder to the outside ring. And the reason why I decided to do this is because the way it was laid out is that we had these temporary structures, and they were, you can see, passing through the middle of the ring itself. And I wanted to get rid of those. But in order to get rid of those, I had to remove the entire structure. They're all merged together, so I had to remove the entire structure for that element. And I decided that before I did that, I would build the permanent connection. Then I could remove these temporary connections. We'd get rid of the structure inside the ring, and everything would work out. And that ended up being probably the best way that I could have handled it, in the sense of getting things done in an efficient way and not having to worry too much about things falling apart or getting out of hand. But the structure of these things, whatever you want to call them, connecting the cylinder to the outer ring, they're hollow. So that meant we could put stuff in them. And I decided, again, we could build the structure and close it in and be done with it, or we could kind of pause and fill it in before we close it up. And that might give us the added benefit of not having to worry about adding the systems, the purposeful blocks, once the structure was closed in, because that gets to be kind of a pain. And the smaller the space that you're working in, the more of a pain it becomes. So we've got, in this case, this is computer capacity. These are processors, computers, whatever, computer cores, I think is what they're called, that we're adding in this specific space. And we've also added some generators, I think, in the middle of the central cylinder. And this was another example in the central cylinder where we had the temporary structure connecting the cylinder to the outer ring was passing right through the middle of the cylinder. So in order to try and make best use of the space available to us in the cylinder, had to get rid of this structure. So all kinds of incentive to just get out here and finish this off. And we ended up going with kind of an elliptical cross section on these pieces, and I'm pretty happy. Very, very simple. Nothing complicated about it, nothing difficult to create. And then once they're done, they have a nice look to them. They don't draw attention to themselves, but if you do look at them, they look kind of nice. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to, this is what I was talking about, when you've got this little wee tiny space you're trying to fill in and the structure is closed in, you do have options that may work, but it's a pretty serious pain in the ass. And ultimately what I ended up doing was removing the sides of these pieces and finish putting the equipment inside and then closing them up again. And also in this case, adding some integrity field generators in behind the final layer of Xanian blocks, just so that it was there and we didn't have to worry about it for this particular part of the ship. So the next episode, we're going to pick up pretty much where we left off here. We're going to finish filling in most of the central cylinder as it sits now, and we'll probably also start filling in the outer ring. What I would like to have on board, in addition to everything else that I've been talking about, is a little bit of cargo capacity. It seems like that would be a beneficial thing to have on a station that's receiving goods in order to make other goods. So talking about, you know, multi-use capabilities for the different kinds of stations, that seemed like a good idea. And we'll see what we end up with, you know, around the point where we've got a certain amount of cargo space. If we've got leftover space in the ring, then that's a pretty good deal too. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.